Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to spend some time with me and check the video out. Guys, today I want to give you some tips and advice on how to choose your first spot to go to when you're fishing in the morning. It's like every time we go fishing, that's the first thing on everybody's mind. So, okay, where am I going to start at? How am I going to begin my day? How am I going to figure these fish out? Where do I want to begin my fishing day? So I got some tips and advice I'm gonna give you guys on that because it's a lot of different variables that are tied up with that. So we'll get into that in today's episode. Also, guys, quick reminder, if you guys, I've talked about this on some other channels, if you guys are looking for an easy Christmas present to buy for somebody, because I'm always into, Tackle Warehouse has got gift cards for all different amounts there. If you guys are interested in picking up a Tackle Warehouse gift card or some tackle with Tackle Warehouse, I'll put my link in the description of this video. If you guys use that link, you can get them, and good way to support the channel as well. So really appreciate that. Okay, guys, this is what you got to decide every time you go fishing. It's like, where am I gonna go first? What's gonna be my first stop of the day? And there's a lot to consider in this as far as, how you want to run it down. Now, ultimately, you want your first stop to be like sometimes your last stop too, where you can go into an area and have a bunch of fish there, just land right on top of them and start catching them. But one of the things that you have to determine as far as your first spot, it's like, are you looking for a spot or are you looking to run a pattern? Now, if you're looking for a spot or area, I'd rather really classify it as an area. This is what is the ideal situation, because if you go into an area, say for example, you go back in the back part of a major creek arm where there's maybe 10 acres of water back there, that if you go into an area like that and you get in there and you start catching fish, you can spend the whole day in there. You don't have to go anywhere else. So that's one consideration, areas. And the next consideration, do you want to run a pattern? Now, some lakes are good area lakes and some lakes are good pattern lakes. Traditionally, the best lakes that are area lakes are places that have a lot of aquatic vegetation, lily pads, hydrilla, milfoil, cattails, something like that. You're going to find that bass in lakes that have aquatic vegetation tend to use more areas predominantly. And the more that you have more of a man-made lake, it's more of a pattern lake. So let's say, for example, you decided one or two options. So say, for example, you decide, I want to, get into an area and I want to get into that area and just fish that area all day long. The first stop that you need to make is going to be dependent upon your predominant cover that allows you to do that, because there's only really two types of scenarios. The area that you fish, as far as in a man-made lake that does not have grass, is going to be usually relegated to the upper extremities of a creek or a river arm, because it narrows down there and it's smaller and there's a diversity of cover. So if I'm looking to find an area to go to, it's usually upper in the back part of the river section of the lake or back part of a creek arm, because that gives me a lot of different waters to fish. And again, if it's on a natural lake, I'm going to try to pull up on a big grass flat or a big grass bed. So my first stop of the day, if I want to run and try to find an area just to settle down in, are going to be one of those two areas, depending upon if there's grass or not. Now, more common with that is trying to decide and build a pattern on something. So let's say, for example, that the lake that you fish is not a real good area lake and you don't have a lot of places where you can just put the trolling motor down and fish all day. You probably will have to run some type of a pattern. The pattern that you run is going to be determined by what the predominant cover is on the lake. So if you have a lake like Lake of the Ozarks, you can run a pattern on boat docks. If you fish a lake that, like Lake Cumberland in Kentucky, you may be running a pattern of fishing Main Lake Bluffs. If you're fishing a lake like Grand Lake in Oklahoma, maybe you go up the river and, your pattern is to fish isolated lay-down logs that are just on flats. So every lake is going to be different in terms of the isolated, pattern cover that they have. So if you do want to run a pattern, your first stop needs to be on that type of structure in a diversity or variety of areas within the lake. So let's say, for example, I want to run some type of a pattern and it's, springtime of the year I'm going to go back into the major creek arms, and I'm going to try to find some shallow secondary points where these fish are either getting ready to spawn, or maybe have gotten done spawning, depending upon the time of the phase, and I'm going to run those secondary points. And depending upon how that works, I could expand that to the main lake or whatever with that. Same with the boat dock situation. Let's say, for example, we're up at Lake of the Ozarks and it's the summertime of the year, and I want to try to get a boat dock pattern going. The first place I go to will maybe be the dock in the back of a cove that's a real shallow dock, to try to get some of those fish that are in shallower water, maybe pitch a jig or something on there. If that works, fine. If not, I may try to pattern those fish out on the main lake docks where there's some deep water off the end of them and there's some fish suspended underneath those boat docks. But running that predominant cover is a good way to start your day with a pattern on it. One of the things that you always also have to do when you're trying to determine place to fish is you've got to break the lake down into a manageable size. Now, this depends on how big the lake is that you're fishing. If you're fishing a smaller lake, not that big of a deal, but if you're fishing a larger man-made impoundment, you can't cover the whole thing. So you have to do a little research before you get to the lake, before you decide where that first spot's going to be. So the area of the lake that you fish or decide on fishing, again, has to do with the time of the year. For example, if we go fishing in the winter time of the year, I'm gonna limit the area that I fish on the lake to the lower end of the lake that usually has cleaner water. If I'm fishing in the springtime of the year, I may be fishing, I'd pick 2 or 3 major creek arms and go to the back of some coves in those creek arms in the spring. If it's summertime and I think the fish are on deep main lake points, I'll get more into the mid-lake area. And then maybe in the fall time of the year, with the water's low, fishing's tough a little bit, I want to get into some dirty water, then I'll limit my area of the lake to, the dirtiest part of the water in the lake and just stay in that area. So it's not as simple as it seems as far as where you're going to decide. You have to have some type of a plan. You can't just go willy-nilly out there. So your plan needs to be based upon those variables of, do you want an area to fish? Do you want a pattern to run? And then use your knowledge of seasonal patterns to determine what part of the lake that's going to hold, the best potential for that. So not easy. There's a lot of ins and outs to it, guys, a lot of variables with it. Like I said, fishing is hunting, because fishing is basically hunting for bass. So that's sort of the way you have to look at it. And sometimes you pull up on your first spot of the day and you catch them right off the bat. And sometimes you don't catch them for a couple days. It takes a couple days to figure them out. So that's just part of the reality of the way bass fishing is. So anyway, I hope it helps out a little bit. We'll talk later.